From the dawn of civilization, mankind has searched for the laws that govern life, principles that are as certain as gravity and as reliable as the sunrise, and among these there exists a quiet but immutable law, one that governs the flow of wealth. It does not reside in the vaults of banks or the hallways of power, but in something far more intimate, the mind of man. This law has no need for signatures or approval. It has no interest in trends or technology. It works silently, constantly, with precision. Most people pass through life unaware of it. They chase money, they fight for positions, they scramble for what they believe are opportunities, never realizing that the law of wealth is not about chasing, it is about aligning. Now I want to tell you something that could change everything. Wealth, true wealth, is not earned by accident, nor is it a matter of luck. It is the natural result of obeying a very old law, one that responds only to those who understand it and live by it. And that law begins, as all things do, in thought. Let's start with this truth. You are now and you become what you think about. Everything in your life, the money you have or do not have, the opportunities you encounter or miss, the people who surround you, the success or struggle you experience, each of these is a reflection not of external circumstance, but of inner condition. The mind is not a passive receiver of life's results. It is the seedbed. Wealth begins not with the bank account, but with the belief system. Not with what you do, but with how you think. And that's why most people remain where they are, not because they lack intelligence or ambition, but because they violate this law every single day without knowing it. They think scarcity. They rehearse limitation. They focus on what they fear, and by the law of mind they attract it. But the few who rise, the builders, the innovators, the leaders, they live in accordance with a different code. They understand that the world is not withholding anything. The world simply mirrors their thoughts, amplifies their beliefs, and returns their mental blueprint in physical form. Let me ask you something. What do you think about all day long? When you're walking alone, when you're staring out the window, when your mind drifts? What fills that space? Because that is the true workroom of your life. That's the command center, and that's where the law is either obeyed or broken. If you think lack, you will lack. If you think growth, you will grow. If you dwell on fear, you will find reasons to retreat. If you think in terms of contribution, service, value, then wealth begins to move toward you like a river drawn to the sea. The law is impersonal. It does not reward the emotional or the desperate. It rewards the disciplined thinker, the one who assumes wealth as a natural result of service. And service, let me remind you, is the true currency of riches. Not shortcuts, not schemes, not games of chance, but service. The law is clear. Your rewards in life will always be in exact proportion to your contribution. Now this law is at work, whether you acknowledge it or not. That's what makes it powerful and dangerous. It's like the law of gravity. You don't have to believe in it. You don't have to understand it. But if you step off a roof, you'll experience its effect. The same is true of the law that brings wealth. If you sow thoughts of resentment, jealousy, or blame, your harvest will match. If you believe others are responsible for your outcome, you give away your power. But if you begin right now to take ownership of every result in your life, if you decide to live by thought rather than by reaction, you activate the law. You step into its current, and it begins to carry you, slowly at first, then with increasing strength toward a new reality. A reality shaped not by force but by alignment, not by struggle but by clarity. The clarity that you are the architect of your fortune, and fortune, like any structure, must be designed from the inside out. You might be asking, but what if I don't have much to offer yet? That's the brilliance of this law. It does not demand perfection. It demands initiation. Begin where you are, with what you have, with what you can do today, and then expand. Polish your craft. Multiply your value. Think constantly about how you can improve the quality and reach of your service to others, because the law is watching, not with eyes, but with energy. It sees contribution and multiplies it. It sees complaint and echoes it. What you put into the world in thought and deed becomes the architecture of what you receive. That's not fantasy. That's the mechanics of the universe. There are no rewards for intention without action, but there are infinite rewards for focused, sustained, and joyful contribution. If you begin thinking in terms of value, what you can give, how you can serve, you start pulling wealth toward you like a magnet pulls iron. Many people ask, what's the shortcut? But they're asking the wrong question. The better question is, what law am I violating that keeps me in struggle? You see, wealth is not a destination, it's a byproduct. It shows up not when you chase it, but when you align with it. And alignment begins in the mind. Think of it this way. If your thoughts are the blueprint, and your actions are the hammer and nails, then your results are the house. Most people keep trying to fix the house without ever changing the blueprint. They switch jobs, move cities, try new routines, but their internal blueprint stays the same, and so their results repeat, over and over, until they stop, think, and begin to redraw the map from within. If you truly want wealth, you must ask yourself, have I become the person to whom wealth naturally flows? Or am I still chasing, striving, forcing, hoping the world gives me what I have not yet become? Let's make this practical. Starting tonight, I want you to take out a notepad. Write down this question. What am I thinking about every day that is shaping my financial reality? Then write the answers. Be honest, not what you wish you thought, what you really think. Then ask, are these thoughts in harmony with wealth? Are they aligned with service, growth, contribution? Or are they built on fear, resentment, and doubt? The law responds to your dominant thoughts, and dominant doesn't mean occasional, it means repeated. If you think a wealthy thought once and then spend the rest of the day in scarcity, you've canceled the signal. But if you begin to dominate your inner world with thoughts of value, direction, purpose, and worthiness, you've activated the law, and like a seed planted in rich soil, it begins its work quietly but powerfully beneath the surface. Days pass, weeks pass, and then new fruit begins to appear. You do not have to believe in this law for it to function. But once you do believe in it, and align your actions accordingly, you will see results so consistent, so inevitable, that you'll wonder why no one taught you this sooner. Perhaps that's why you're here now, listening, reflecting, ready, because timing is a strange thing. It brings the right message when the mind is open to receive. So I want you to know there is no delay on this law. There is only delay in obedience. And obedience begins with a decision. Decide to become a person of value, a person who radiates service, a person who no longer blames or begs or waits for approval. Wealth comes to the one who decides, acts, and persists. This law cannot be bribed, bought, or manipulated. It can only be obeyed. And the moment you begin living in harmony with it, you begin to move, quietly, steadily, unshakably toward your highest potential. There's a reason most people never build wealth, even when they work long hours and follow the rules. It's because effort alone is not enough. The law that brings wealth doesn't reward busyness. It rewards clarity, alignment, and service. The man may labor 10 hours a day, 6 days a week, and still live in quiet financial frustration if his thoughts are scattered, his value undefined, and his contribution inconsistent. But another, who spends each morning in clear thought, each hour in focused service, and each evening reviewing his progress, he begins to move in harmony with the rhythm of prosperity. The world is not arbitrary, it is ordered, and wealth follows order like harvest follows planting. So I want you to understand something foundational. The more ordered your thinking becomes, the more structured your life becomes, and the more predictable your financial growth becomes. Confusion repels wealth. Precision attracts it. And the first order is this: know what you want and know who you must become to receive it. The goal, you see, is not a wish. A wish is passive. It waits. A goal is active. It moves. It stretches. It transforms. And when it is written down, reviewed daily, and charged with emotion, it becomes a command to the subconscious. That's where wealth begins, inside the inner command center of the mind. Now, most people set weak goals, vague ones. I want to make more money. That is not a goal. That is a murmur. A goal must be specific. It must be visual. It must be loaded with the clarity of what, how, when, and why. It must ignite your spirit. It must shape your behavior. Because once the subconscious accepts a goal, it begins to activate the law, pulling ideas, people, opportunities, and awareness into alignment with that outcome. But the goal must be repeated, thought of often, believed in deeply, and it must match the self-image of the one pursuing it. Otherwise, the inner world will reject it, and the outer world will withhold it. Let me ask you, what goal have you set so clearly, so precisely that it cannot be mistaken? Can you describe it without hesitation? Can you see it in your mind's eye? Can you feel it already yours? Because until that happens, wealth cannot obey the law. The mind cannot build what it cannot see. You must imprint the vision, sharpen it, reinforce it. And this is not some trick of fantasy. It is the method used by leaders, innovators, athletes, creators, and empire builders for centuries. What you consistently hold in mind with clarity and belief becomes the blueprint for your future. The mind, once impressed, begins to work tirelessly day and night to bring that picture into being. It speaks to your reticular activating system. It shifts your emotional filter. It magnetizes your behavior. But here's the missing piece. The vision must match your belief in yourself. You cannot just want wealth. You must believe that you are the kind of person who attracts, manages, and multiplies it through discipline, service, and integrity. Now, belief is not born in a moment, it is built, and like a muscle, it must be exercised. That means choosing thoughts on purpose. It means removing the internal language of I can't, I don't know how, or I'm not ready. Every time you allow those thoughts to live, you are building a self-image that repels wealth. But every time you interrupt those patterns and say, I am capable, I am learning, I am becoming, you are installing new architecture. Mental programming is not magic, it's mechanics. Repetition is the tool, emotion is the fuel, identity is the foundation. If you see yourself as poor, overwhelmed, or stuck, then every action you take will be tinted with that belief. But if you see yourself as a rising leader, a disciplined contributor, a person of strength and order, your actions will reflect that image, and the world will mirror it back to you in resources, in relationships, and in results. Let's simplify it further. You do not get what you want, you get who you are. The law does not respond to verbal pleas. It responds to character, vision, and alignment. That's why so many people stay broke while shouting affirmations. They speak wealth, but they live disorder. They say they want abundance, but they entertain gossip, waste time, and neglect their responsibilities. The law does not care about slogans. It cares about structure. It rewards congruence between thought, word, and deed. When your thoughts are focused on value, when your words uplift and affirm that value, and when your actions demonstrate discipline and service, then you are walking in the rhythm of wealth. And wealth cannot help but respond. It moves toward integrity like iron to a magnet. Not all at once, but consistently, because the law is always listening, always watching, and always responding to the dominant signal you send with your life. Now consider this truth. Comfort is the enemy of wealth, not because comfort is wrong, but because it tends to lull us into stagnation. When a man becomes too comfortable, he stops growing, he stops stretching, he stops thinking creatively, and soon he begins to decline, not all at once, but in small, imperceptible ways. He lowers his standards, he delays decisions, he tolerates more than he should, and before long, he is surrounded by mediocrity, not because he lacked talent, but because he stopped evolving. The law that brings wealth rewards motion, discipline, forward momentum. It does not bless those who wait, it blesses those who act. Even imperfectly, even with fear in their chest and doubt in their mind, but still they move, and by moving they signal life itself. I am ready, I am willing, I am becoming, and life, ever faithful, responds. Let's return to the core idea. Wealth is not something you chase, it's something you magnetize through identity and service. If you are not receiving the wealth you desire, it is not because the law is broken, it is because the internal magnet is weak. And that magnet is made of thought, belief, value, and discipline. You strengthen it by choosing high-quality thoughts. You charge it by visualizing your goal as already real. You align it by contributing to others without hesitation. And you protect it by refusing to entertain scarcity, comparison, or excuses. That is how the law works. Quietly, consistently, repeatedly. The question is not whether the law is working. The question is, are you working in harmony with it? Every thought you think, every action you take, every emotion you indulge is either attracting wealth or pushing it away. There is no neutral ground. You are always moving, either closer to or further from the results you desire. And so I'll challenge you now. Take 30 minutes tonight. Just 30. Turn off the noise, sit with yourself, and write down your clearest financial goal. Write it with detail, with emotion, with gratitude, as though it were already achieved. Then beneath it, write the answer to this question. Who must I become to receive this? That answer is your next assignment. It is your blueprint for action. And if you review that answer daily, if you meditate on it, affirm it, and take steps in alignment with it, you will begin to notice something strange. Doors open, ideas arrive, confidence grows, and slowly the invisible world begins to shift in your favor. That is not luck, that is law, the law that brings wealth, and it is yours to use, starting now. Every day you are broadcasting a signal. That signal is not in your words, not in your clothing, not even in your resume. It's in your thoughts, what you dwell on, what you expect, what you silently believe about yourself and the world. That signal becomes your identity, and identity is magnetic. It draws to you people, events, opportunities, and even obstacles that match the frequency of who you are, not who you pretend to be. This is the unspoken truth behind lasting wealth. You do not attract what you want. You attract what you are, and if you want to change what you attract, you must begin by changing the dominant broadcast of your mind. That's why affirmations, visualizations, and goal cards are powerful, not because they're magical, but because they rewrite the broadcast. They condition the mind to think differently, and thinking differently is the first step toward living differently. But make no mistake, this is not wishful thinking. This is identity engineering, and it is the foundation upon which every fortune is built. So let's be practical. What is the self-image of someone who creates wealth? What does he believe about himself? What does she expect from life? You'll find certain patterns. They believe that value flows through them, not just to them. They expect life to respond to their initiative, not to their wishes. They see themselves as creators, not victims. They believe they belong in rooms of opportunity, and most importantly, they take responsibility for everything they touch. That belief system creates behavior, and behavior reinforces identity. Over time, that creates reputation, and reputation, when built on value and reliability, becomes one of the most profitable assets a person can possess. You may lose money, you may fail in business, but if you maintain a reputation of consistency, discipline, and service, wealth will find its way back to you because people trust you, and trust is what opens doors that effort alone cannot. Now consider this. Most people's identity is shaped by memory, not by vision. They replay the past, relive old failures, and rehearse limits that no longer apply. But wealth requires forward vision. It requires that you see not what was, but what can be, and that you act in accordance with that vision before it becomes reality. That's where most fall short. They wait for evidence before they believe. But those who obey the law of wealth reverse the formula. They believe first, they act as if, they embody the identity now, and the evidence catches up later. This is not delusion. This is causality. You must act like the person who deserves the reward before the reward arrives. That means showing up early, speaking with clarity, walking with posture, handling your money with respect, even if there's not much of it yet. Why? Because that behavior broadcasts a new signal, and the world begins to respond, not to your past, but to your present self-image. This is why discipline matters. Discipline is not punishment. It is alignment. It is the act of honoring your highest self even when your current circumstances don't yet reflect it. Every time you choose discipline, you reinforce your new identity. Every time you wake up early, say no to distraction, invest in yourself, or follow through on a promise, you send a message, this is who I am now. And that message shapes reality. Not immediately, but inevitably. The law of wealth does not rush, but it never fails. It brings to the disciplined what the undisciplined spend their lives chasing in vain. So if you find yourself drifting, forgetting who you want to become, return to your disciplines. Your habits are anchors. They hold you to your course when storms of doubt and delay try to shake you loose. And with each day of consistent behavior, your internal broadcast strengthens, and as it strengthens, it begins to override your old signal. And that's when the real shift begins. I want you to pause and think about this. What behaviors in your life are out of alignment with the wealth you desire? Do you waste time? Do you speak poorly of yourself? Do you neglect the basics, rest, planning, preparation? These are not small things, they are signals, and each one tells the world something about what you expect. If you want to raise your income, raise your standard. Clean your environment, track your habits, eliminate the excuses you've grown comfortable with. Because the law of wealth is watching, not to judge, but to respond. It waits for you to step into congruence. And once you do, the shift is not subtle. People begin to speak of you differently. Opportunities show up with less resistance. You begin to feel a strange sense of certainty, not based on circumstances, but on character. That's when you know your signal has changed, and the world is adjusting to meet it. Let's return to the root of this message. Wealth is not something you hustle into being. It is something you align with through a sustained, elevated identity. And that identity must be constructed brick by brick through daily choices. This is the opposite of hype. It is quiet, it is deep, it is foundational. Most never build it because they are too distracted by the noise of the world. But those who do, they walk differently. They speak with fewer words but more impact. They do not chase, they magnetize. And that is a power no recession, no failure, no critic can take away, because it comes from within. And what is built within becomes indestructible. So begin today. Choose one behavior that matches the future version of yourself. Do it with excellence. Repeat it until it becomes part of you. Then add another. This is the path. Quiet, steady, unstoppable. So I ask you now, what signal are you broadcasting to the world? What identity are you wearing, even when no one is watching? And are your behaviors reinforcing that identity or eroding it? Answer honestly, because the law of wealth is not fooled by appearances. It responds only to essence, and your essence is the sum of what you believe, what you expect, and what you do. Begin to change those, and everything else must follow. You do not need to force the outcome. You simply need to become the person for whom the outcome is natural. That is the quiet secret of wealth. Not struggle, not sacrifice without reason, but self-mastery. That is the law, and it is working whether you are or not. There's a principle I want to give you now, one that few truly understand and fewer still apply with consistency. It is this: your income will always be in direct proportion to the quantity and quality of service you render to others. That sentence holds more power than most entire books. If you truly understand it, if you make it the foundation of your thinking, your earning power becomes unlimited. You see, money is not the goal, it is the byproduct. It is the certificate of merit for service rendered. And when that service is elevated, refined, multiplied, and offered with sincerity and consistency, the rewards must increase. They cannot do otherwise. This is not philosophy, this is cause and effect. If you want more money, stop asking how to get more and start asking how to give more. More value, more clarity, more usefulness. Look at the people who are paid well in any field. What do they have in common? They are better, faster, more thoughtful, more creative, or more committed to solving problems for others. And because they solve more problems, they earn more certificates of appreciation, what we call money. Now, many will resist this truth. They will say, "But I work hard." And yes, many people do, but effort alone is not the measure. The key is usefulness. A man may dig ditches with great effort, but a machine that digs faster with precision will be paid more. Why? Because usefulness is the law's measuring stick. We are not rewarded for sweat, we are rewarded for service. And the greatest service is the one that scales, service that touches many, solves real problems, and creates value that multiplies even when we're asleep. Think of the teacher who inspires generations, the inventor who changes an industry, the entrepreneur who creates solutions that reach thousands. These people have found a way to make their usefulness visible, scalable, and repeatable. And when they do, the law brings wealth, not because they are lucky, but because they are aligned. You cannot stop a man who dedicates himself to service. The world will try to resist him at first, but soon it must yield, because value cannot be denied for long. Let's take this deeper. There are 3 dimensions of service that determine your wealth trajectory: the quality of what you offer, the quantity of people you serve, and the spirit in which you serve them. The first is about excellence, being the best at what you do, refining your craft, delivering more than what's expected. The second is about reach, expanding your audience, increasing your visibility, finding ways to distribute your value far and wide. And the third, perhaps most powerful, is spirit. Are you doing it with joy, with gratitude, with love for the work and the people it serves? When all 3 align, wealth follows. When only one is active, the results are slow. If you are excellent but invisible, you remain broke. If you are popular but offer little value, you may rise fast but fall faster. But when quality, quantity, and spirit combine, the law activates with force. It moves people, circumstances, and timing in your favor. Not instantly, but inevitably. So ask yourself right now, how good is the service I provide? How many people benefit from it? And what spirit do I carry when I deliver it? Be honest. These 3 questions are your compass. They will show you exactly where you are and where you must go. If you want more income, find the answer in these questions. Do not look to luck. Do not blame the economy. Do not wait for someone to rescue you. Wealth is not something bestowed. It is something aligned with. It is something invited through clarity, contribution, and consistent execution. And once you begin to answer these questions with action, not just ideas, you begin to ascend. The world responds to motion. It moves when you move. And when you move with purpose and precision, it cannot ignore you. That is the law. That is the code. And it never changes. Let me give you an image. Think of a river. The current is always moving. Those who build their boats and learn to steer, those who align with the current, move swiftly and efficiently toward their destination. But those who fight the current, or drift without direction, or try to go upstream by force, they exhaust themselves and never arrive. Wealth is like that river. It is already flowing, but you must build your vessel. You must learn to steer, and above all, you must know where you're going. Service is your boat. Vision is your map. Discipline is your oar. And belief is the wind in your sail. If one is missing, progress slows. But when all are active, your journey accelerates. And you begin to pass others not because you are better, but because you are aligned. The river favors those who respect its rhythm, and the law of wealth favors those who understand its flow. Too many people try to force outcomes. They push, they grind, they overwork. And while effort is noble, misaligned effort is exhausting. True wealth comes from right action, not frantic action. It comes from knowing what to build, who to serve, and how to serve them with excellence. That clarity creates peace, and from that peace emerges power. Not the power of noise or showmanship, but quiet power, the power of results, of reliability, of value so strong it cannot be ignored. You don't need to beg for attention. You need to become undeniable, and that comes not from shouting louder, but from serving better. If you want to be remembered, solve a real problem. If you want to be respected, show up every day and deliver value with humility. And if you want to be wealthy, build systems of service that work when you do and when you don't. That's when the law responds. That's when the current shifts in your favor. Let's bring it home. Wealth is never the goal, it is always the shadow cast by service. If you chase the shadow, you'll always miss. But if you walk with the sun, meaning purpose, contribution, and clarity, the shadow of wealth will follow you everywhere. It will show up in unexpected opportunities, in increased confidence, in people drawn to your energy and reliability. And in time, it will show up in numbers, income, assets, financial peace. But you must start with the walk. You must start with the sun. That means waking up every day asking not what can I get, but what can I give? And then giving it. Not once, not when you feel like it, but as a way of life. That consistency makes you trustworthy. And trust is the currency that wealth responds to. So as we close this part of our journey together, I invite you to do something powerful. Take 15 minutes and audit your value. Write down the service you currently provide. Be detailed. Then write how you can improve it by just 10%. Better quality, wider reach, deeper spirit. And then commit to that improvement this week. No delay, no perfection, just movement. That small shift places you in the current of the law, and the law begins to respond. Not tomorrow, now, quietly, steadily. Because when you respect the law of wealth, wealth begins to respect you. Let's now speak of something rarely discussed in practical terms: faith. Not the kind of faith confined to religion or philosophy, but the kind of faith that builds empires, creates fortunes, and transforms the lives of ordinary men and women into extraordinary examples of potential fulfilled. Faith, in its purest form, is the ability to act with conviction before the evidence appears. It is the decision to move in the direction of your vision with complete assurance that the results will follow. Most people wait for proof before they believe, but the law that brings wealth does not respond to passive observation. It responds to initiative. Faith is initiative. It is action backed by belief. And belief, when reinforced through repetition and aligned behavior, becomes certainty. Certainty is magnetic. It draws resources. It awakens creativity. It stirs the subconscious to reveal solutions that were hidden just moments before. And most importantly, it silences doubt. Not by argument, but by authority. When a man walks in faith, the world cannot help but respond, because that level of confidence, rooted in inner vision, commands movement. But let us be clear, faith is not fantasy. It is not wishing, hoping, or waiting for signs. It is directed force, and it must be aimed with precision. You cannot have faith in nothing. You must have faith in something, and that something must be worthy of your full commitment. That means choosing a goal so clearly, so vividly, so emotionally charged, that it becomes a living presence in your mind. You see it, you feel it, you speak as if it already exists, and then you act accordingly. You plan, you prepare, you study, you build. Even if the world around you offers no sign of progress, you continue. Why? Because the progress has already begun within you, and everything external must catch up. That is the nature of reality. It follows thought, not the other way around. Faith is the bridge between the unseen and the seen. It is the hand that reaches forward before the hand of circumstance offers anything in return. And the man or woman who possesses it walks in power long before the power is visible. There is a simple test to know if you are walking in faith or fear. Look at your decisions. Are they expansionary or protective? Do you move forward with confidence, or do you hesitate, second-guess, delay? Every decision is a signal to the universe. It says, I believe or I doubt. And the law is watching, not to punish, but to respond. Faith-filled action is the language of creation. It says, I trust the process. It says, I trust myself. It says, I will build this no matter what I see. That language builds empires, but fear, on the other hand, builds prisons, mental, emotional, and financial prisons. And the tragedy is that most people live in them voluntarily. They believe the bars are real, but the truth is they are made of thought. Change the thought and the prison dissolves. Walk in faith and the walls vanish. But you must begin. You must speak differently. You must act as though the world already agrees with your vision, and soon it will. Now here's where it gets interesting. Faith is contagious. When you carry it, people feel it. They trust you. They follow you. They want to work with you, invest in you, help you. Not because of what you say, but because of how you are. Your energy, your certainty, your presence, these are wealth attractors. They signal competence. They radiate leadership. And in a world filled with doubt and hesitation, a person who acts with unwavering faith becomes a lighthouse. They shine, they guide, they magnetize opportunity. That's why you'll often see people with less talent, less experience, and fewer credentials rise faster than others. It's not because they're lucky, it's because they believe. They believe in their value, they believe in their future, and that belief spills into every room they enter, every project they touch, every conversation they have, and the world responds, not to their resume, but to their resonance. So how do you build this kind of faith? Through repetition and rehearsal. You must speak your vision daily. You must visualize it in vivid detail. You must write it down, read it aloud, feel it as though it were already done. You must surround yourself with environments that reinforce it. Books, mentors, conversations, habits. You must eliminate the voices, both internal and external, that contradict it. Because every contradiction weakens your signal, and the strength of your signal determines the speed of your results. Faith must be cultivated. It is not given, it is built, and the longer you walk in it, the stronger it becomes, until it becomes unshakable. That's when the breakthroughs occur. Not because something changed on the outside, but because you changed, and the outside had no choice but to reflect it. Let's make this practical. Take the goal you wrote earlier, the one tied to your financial vision. I want you to write it again, but this time write it in the present tense, as if it is already real. I earned this amount through this service with this level of joy and clarity. Be precise, then read it aloud every morning and night. Close your eyes, see it, feel it, speak it, walk as if it were true, make decisions as if it were true. Let that vision govern your schedule, your spending, your relationships, and watch what happens. Slowly, reality begins to bend. It starts to align, not with what is, but with what is believed. That is the power of faith. It bends the world into shape, not through force, but through resonance. The world always catches up to the man who is willing to walk ahead of the evidence. Understand this. You do not need to see the full path. You only need to take the next step in belief. The staircase reveals itself to the faithful, and each step strengthens the signal. Each decision reaffirms the identity, and with each act of belief, the law responds, not in grand gestures at first, but in subtle shifts. You meet the right person. You notice the right idea. You are guided to the next move. These are not coincidences. They are confirmations, signs that the law is active, that faith is working, that your inner world is reshaping the outer one. And the more you walk in faith, the more the evidence appears, until what was once a distant dream becomes your normal day. So I'll leave you with this. Faith is the furnace in which wealth is forged. It is the invisible material from which fortunes are built. It cannot be measured by the eye, but its effects are undeniable. And it is available to anyone, rich or poor, young or old, educated or not, who is willing to believe before they see, who is willing to act before they're ready, who is willing to move while others wait. That is how the law works. That is how wealth is summoned. And that is your task now, not to convince the world, but to convince yourself. And once you do, the world will follow. There is a reason I have returned again and again to the mind, because all lasting wealth is first an internal event. The riches you see in the external world are echoes, reflections of thoughts nurtured, beliefs accepted, disciplines honored. Before the house is built, the blueprint must be drawn. Before the tree grows, the seed must be planted. And before wealth appears in your life, the idea of wealth, its structure, its meaning, its purpose must be accepted fully in your mind. The average person lives backwards. They wait for the outer world to change before they adjust their inner world. But the law of wealth operates in the opposite direction. It requires that the change first be made in thought, in expectation, in action. Only then does the outer world bend in response. So I ask you, what image of wealth lives in your mind? Is it vague or clear? Is it exciting or burdened by guilt? Is it expansive or constrained? Because your current relationship with money, with opportunity, with abundance, is nothing more than a mirror of those internal images. Now let's make this practical. Take a moment to visualize wealth, not as some fantasy, not as luxury alone, but as contribution, as impact, as expansion. What does that look like in your life? How would you dress? How would you walk? What would your calendar look like? Who would you serve? You see, wealth must have form before it can have function. Most people block the law by being unclear. They say they want more money, but they don't define how much, why, or for what purpose. Vague goals produce vague results. Clear goals create magnetic pull. If you say, I want to earn $250,000 a year through a business that helps people master their habits, that gives your mind something to aim at. It gives your subconscious something to work with. It creates conditions for your behavior to align. But if you say, I just want to be rich, the law cannot respond, because the command is cloudy. You must issue clear commands, precise targets, detailed visions. Then and only then does the machinery of creation begin to turn in your favor. And let me tell you, once the mind accepts a new identity, a new standard, a new expectation, life begins to rearrange itself to match. It starts subtly, a new idea, a sudden burst of energy, an unexpected conversation. But soon the rhythm picks up. You find yourself making decisions faster, with less doubt. You say no to distractions without guilt. You begin to guard your time like treasure. Why? Because you have accepted the idea that your life matters, that your gifts are valuable, that your time is sacred. And with that decision, you exit the fog of mediocrity and enter the path of mastery. This path is narrow, yes, but it is lit. And those who walk it walk with purpose. They speak differently. They listen carefully. They honor silence. They do not explain themselves to those who do not understand. They are not driven by ego, but by calling. And wealth, real wealth, is always attracted to those who move with that kind of internal gravity. Let's speak now of environment, because the law of wealth is magnified or muffled by your surroundings. If you live in chaos, you will think in chaos. If you spend your time with people who complain, you will find it harder to create. If your workspace is cluttered, if your routines are reactive, if your inputs are noisy and scattered, you are working against the law. Order is the first principle of prosperity. Not rigid control, but intentional structure. A clean desk, a quiet morning, a well-planned week. These are not small details, they are rituals of wealth. They tell your subconscious, I am ready. They tell the universe, I take this seriously. And when you treat your life with reverence, life begins to reward you in kind. So take inventory of your environment. What needs to be cleared? Who needs to be limited? What needs to be upgraded? Not for appearance, but for function. Because environment is not neutral. It is either pulling you forward or holding you back. Choose accordingly. Now I want to address one of the most misunderstood aspects of wealth: speed. We live in a world obsessed with overnight success, but the law of wealth is not interested in speed. It is interested in alignment. Speed without direction leads to exhaustion. Direction, even when slow, leads to compounding power. If you build fast but without foundation, you will collapse. If you build slow but with wisdom, you will endure. Wealth rewards endurance. It rewards those who can remain focused while others chase distractions. It rewards those who can say not yet to temptations and yes to the daily disciplines. So do not worry if your results are not immediate. Worry only if your process is undisciplined. The oak tree does not sprout in a week, but it outlasts the weeds that do. You are not here to chase, you are here to become. And becoming takes time, repetition, and resilience. So I ask you again, are you becoming the kind of person to whom wealth flows naturally? Or are you still trying to manipulate the results without transforming the root? Because the root is always internal. It's your beliefs, your standards, your rituals, your courage. You cannot harvest a different crop without planting different seeds. And the seeds of wealth are thoughts of contribution, action rooted in purpose, decisions made from clarity, and habits governed by long-term vision. These are not glamorous, they are not loud, but they are the bricks that build empires. Every time you act from vision instead of emotion, every time you finish a task you wanted to avoid, every time you review your plan instead of scrolling through distractions, you are proving to the law that you are ready, that you are serious, that you are no longer available for mediocrity. Let's close this part with a challenge. Take one full day this week and live it as if your financial breakthrough had already occurred. Not in reckless spending, but in how you carry yourself, how you plan, how you speak, how you think. Imagine the version of yourself that already has the wealth you desire. How do they spend their morning? What do they allow into their mind? Who do they keep close? What kind of decisions do they make without hesitation? Then live that way for one day and notice what happens. Notice how the world reacts. Notice how you feel. That's the beginning of alignment. That's the bridge between who you are and who you are becoming. and that bridge is the path the law of wealth travels upon. There comes a moment in every journey, whether personal, professional, or financial, when the path forward becomes quiet. The noise fades, the excitement softens, and what remains is the question that determines everything. Will I continue? When the initial thrill of a new goal wears off, when progress slows, when results are delayed, that is the test. That is the place where most turn back, switch lanes, or convince themselves it wasn't meant to be. But those who understand the law of wealth know this moment for what it is, the proving ground. This is where identity is solidified. This is where the weak fall away and the strong step forward. Because wealth is not granted to the interested. It is reserved for the committed. And commitment is measured not in how you act when it's easy, but how you remain when it's quiet, slow, and uncertain. Discipline without applause. Vision without external validation. That is the crucible of wealth, and few pass through it without scars. But let me tell you something most people never hear. Boredom is a sign you're getting close. Not excitement, not fireworks. Boredom. Why? Because repetition is what rewires the mind, and rewiring requires stillness, consistency, and long obedience in the same direction. The wealthy are not those who do 100 different things. They are those who do a few key things over and over with excellence. That's why routines matter. That's why mastery matters. That's why tracking your behavior daily, even when nothing seems to change, matters. Because beneath the surface, something is changing. Neural patterns are strengthening. Emotional discipline is deepening. Habits are being carved into the structure of your day. And over time, that structure becomes strength. That strength becomes stability. And that stability becomes a platform for quantum growth. But it starts with the willingness to embrace the dull, to master the mundane, to fall in love with the process. Let's talk about process. Because the law of wealth does not reward outcomes, it rewards systems. A system is a repeatable process, a way of thinking, acting, and deciding that produces consistent results over time. Most people have goals, but no systems. They say they want to make more money, but they haven't mapped out the daily actions, the weekly reviews, the monthly recalibrations that would ensure progress. That's like wanting to grow crops without knowing how to irrigate the soil. The goal is the vision. The system is the structure that carries the vision into reality. So I ask you, do you have a system for your finances? For your productivity? For your learning? For your self-renewal? Wealth responds to structure. Not wishful thinking, not emotional highs, structure. When you build your life on clear systems, morning routines, focused work blocks, spending plans, learning cycles, you activate the law. You create predictability in a world obsessed with chaos. And that predictability becomes leverage. Here's another truth. What you do when no one is watching will determine what happens when everyone is watching. Private discipline creates public reward. The hours you spend reading, thinking, writing, planning, those are not invisible to the law. They are being recorded, not by society, but by the subconscious. And the subconscious builds your life on the patterns it sees most. So if your days are filled with distraction, with avoidance, with passive consumption, the subconscious builds accordingly. But if your days are anchored in intention, in creation, in service, in mastery, the subconscious builds something else, something lasting, something worthy. And over time, that private excellence becomes visible. People begin to notice your energy, your clarity, your output, and they say you're lucky. But they don't see the process. They don't see the systems. They don't see the faith it took to persist in silence. But you know, and the law knows, and that is enough. Let's speak now of momentum. Momentum is invisible at first. Like a train pulling out of the station, the first few steps feel slow, even frustrating. You question whether it's working, whether it's worth it. But if you continue, if you honor the plan even when it feels fruitless, something clicks. The wheels catch, the pace quickens, your thoughts align, your decisions get sharper, your confidence returns, and suddenly, opportunities appear that were once hidden. People start responding differently. You feel stronger, more certain, more grounded. That's momentum. And it does not come from fits of inspiration. It comes from stacking days. One good day, then another, not perfect, just consistent. And those days compounded over weeks and months become power. They become the force that moves you from effort to ease, from strategy to instinct, from surviving to leading. That's what momentum does. But you must build it in obscurity before it shows up in visibility. Now let me caution you, just as the law rewards momentum, it also punishes its neglect. If you stop too soon, if you break your word to yourself, if you retreat into comfort after a short burst of effort, you lose not just progress, but trust. Trust in yourself, trust from others, and most importantly, trust from the law. because the law is watching consistency. It does not reward potential, it rewards persistence. The man who shows up daily, who honors his rituals, who builds quietly while others talk loudly, that man will be blessed, not because he is favored, but because he is faithful. And faithfulness over time becomes force. You want to be wealthy? Become faithful to the process. Become the kind of person who cannot be moved by mood, delay, or distraction. Become reliable, unshakable, steady. That is more rare than talent, and more valuable than gold. Let me give you something tangible. Starting tomorrow, choose 3 non-negotiables, 3 behaviors that, if done every day, would guarantee progress toward your wealth vision. Make them simple, measurable, and aligned with your goals. Perhaps it's 90 minutes of focused work, reviewing your financials, reading 10 pages of a strategic book. Whatever they are, commit to them fully, not for a week, for 90 days. No breaks, no excuses, just proof. Proof to yourself, proof to the law, that you are serious, that you are worthy, that you are ready. These are not just habits, they are declarations. They say, I am becoming someone new, and the law hears that declaration, and it begins to shift the current in your favor. So now, I ask you to remember what we've built. From thought to belief, from belief to identity, from identity to action, from action to process, from process to momentum, and now from momentum to mastery. You are not at the beginning, you are deep in the transformation. The world may not see it yet, but it's happening, quietly, powerfully, in your thoughts, in your routines, in the invisible commitments you now honor without applause. Keep going, do not stop. Do not negotiate with the old version of yourself. The law of wealth is not waiting, it is responding. Every step you take echoes through the unseen, and soon the seen will follow.